Welcome to the Next Class 2.0 with host Rob Birdsell, Kent Hickey, and Erin Barisano. Join us as we discuss the latest trends and innovations shaping education.
Hello and welcome to the Next Class. I'm Rob Birdsell, joined by my co-host Erin Barisano. Erin, how are you?
I'm doing great, Rob. It's always good to be here with you.
Likewise. How are things in Orange County?
Yeah, we're moving along. It's so far it's been a great school year. So really proud of my schools.
That's awesome. How about the rain? Has it affected you?
Not too bad. I mean, we sure needed it. So we're grateful. But you know us in California, Southern California, we're kind of paralyzed by the rain.
I remember that. It was like snow. It was like, this is just rain, people.
Exactly.
What's the big deal?
Everybody just kind of stops in their tracks. They don't know what to do. Yeah.
So, Erin, we've got a conversation today about Pope Leo's Apostolic Letter, Drawing New Maps of Hope, issued October 27th. We're quite timely on this. I'm impressed how quickly we got going, and this is marking 60 years since Gravissimum Educationis.
Yes.
Can you pronounce that?
Gravissimum Educationis, yeah.
I wasn't even close. And Erin, as we've talked about, we're at an inflection point for Catholic schools.
Yeah.
We're educating 1.7 million students in the U.S., down from 5 million in the 60s. We're facing declining enrollment, a youth mental health crisis, digital distraction, and cultural polarization. But this letter isn't defensive. It's bold. The Pope calls us choreographers of hope. I loved that phrase. And so today we want to explore what that means with two people who think deeply about Catholic education at the university level. Angela Mitchell and John Reyes from Boston College Roche Center. Can you do you know these folks?
I do. You know, I had the privilege of working with John in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. We were on the same team together. I was an associate superintendent, and he was a director of educational technology. So actually, we were there exactly the same time, those same 5 years before moving on to different things.
Look at that timing.
Been fun. And good timing. I was just talking about you, John, and talking about our time in LA together.
Ears are burning, and I'm also in LA right now too, so that's probably why.
That's awesome. Well, John, welcome to the Next Class, and excited to see you Wednesday.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Final seminar.
What about Angela Mitchell? Have you met Angela before, Erin?
I met Angela. I'm so looking forward to meeting her and talking to her. You know, I spent some time in Ireland when I was in college, so that'll be fun to meet her.
And there she is. Likewise, right on time.
All right. Hey, Angela.
John and Angela, welcome to the Next Class. And it is great to have you each here. Erin and I were saying that, John, it's going to be great to have you back out at Eiley on Wednesday, so I get to see you almost every day this week. And Erin was giving a bit of your background, how the two of you work together in LA.
Yeah.
For our listeners, could you just give a quick introduction and background and your role today at Boston College's Roche Center?
Yeah, really happy to be on the podcast. My name is John Reyes. I work with the Roche Center for Catholic Education within the Lynch School of Education and Human Development at Boston College. I serve as the Director of Research and Program Evaluation. I've been in this role for 4 years, so going on 5. I've had a number of different roles in Catholic education. I started off my career in the Archdiocese of Los Angeles as a teacher at St. Bernard School in Glassell Park in Northeast LA. And then I had the pleasure of working with Erin Barisano in the Department of Catholic Schools under the leadership of Dr. Kevin Baxter. I was there for 5 years as the Director of Ed Tech. And then got the urge and the call to move across the country from Southern California to South Carolina. I served as an assistant superintendent in the Diocese of Charleston, so for our 32 schools in the state of South Carolina. Was there for about 2 years, and then served for a year at NCEA as the Executive Director of Operational Vitality, helping the organization through its shift to digital platforms during the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I've been blessed to be part of Dr. Melody Wittenbach's team alongside Angela Mitchell here, and serving Catholic schools through higher ed. So really excited to be on this podcast, and good to be with Erin again. Good to be with you, Rob. I feel like the next couple of days at Eiley in Lone Rock are going to be incredible. So looking forward to our third and final seminar there.
That's great. And Charleston is getting the next Cristo Rey school.
It's so exciting. Yeah, talk about a diocese that's on the rise. I remember when I was at NCEA, it was one of 8 dioceses that actually grew during the pandemic, that first year of the pandemic. So it was really, really exciting to see. So that's really cool.
And Angela, welcome. Will you give our
you.
listeners a little bit of your background?
Sure, I am coming to you from Dublin, Ireland. So I also work for the Roche Center, and in a very Catholic way, I live and work in Dublin, work for the Roche Center. At Boston College, but here in Ireland. And I'm the Director of Leadership Formation Programs here. So I run a number of programs for educational leaders in Catholic education here in Ireland. My own background, I suppose, I'm Irish, I'm from the west of Ireland. And I was a school teacher, a Catholic school teacher, and then a Catholic school principal in an inner city school here in Dublin for 13 years. And during that time, I went back into, I dipped in and out of study always, and then came back repeatedly to leadership studies. And that led me eventually to Notre Dame, to the University of Notre Dame. I did the REMIC program there, and I worked for the Alliance for Catholic Education for 4 years, and then started this year with Boston College. So I very much enjoy my work in formation.
That's great. Well, welcome. So before we dive into this this amazing apostolic letter, let me share why this matters personally to me. In 1984, the Jesuits at Market High awakened something in me. I still remember Father Bill Doran said at parent night, so this was freshmen and freshman parents, and he stood there, a very humble, small Jesuit, but had a booming voice, and he said, "If you want a school to get your son into Harvard, you chose the wrong school. But if you chose a school to get your son into heaven, you made the right choice." That confidence, that prophetic boldness is what this letter resonated for me. So to begin, John, let's turn to you first. So you work at the intersection of research and practice in Catholic education, as you just shared. When you first read this letter, what struck you? What jumped off of the page for you?
I mean, right off the clip, I think in that first section of the letter, I think, Pope Leo makes this case, this ever ancient, ever new case for Catholic education, that it is consistently relevant, right? And so sometimes, when you come across people that have opinions about Catholic education, that serve in Catholic education, you sometimes get the impression that people don't feel that what Catholic education has to offer is relevant for the present day. And I think what Leo says right off the bat is that because Catholic education is focused on the integral development of the human person and the development of the person's imago Dei, it will always be relevant, right? Because it's not just about skills, it's not just about technical competencies, it's not just about college and career readiness, it's about this bold trajectory of the human person towards heaven. And so I love that right off the bat. He's like, what we're talking about today with Catholic schools is relevant in this day as much as it was 30 years ago, as much as it was, I'm doing the math roughly, 41 years ago when you were at Marquette High, Rob, as relevant as it was 60 years ago during sort of the peak of Catholic school enrollment here in the United States. And it's because of that focus on the integral development of the human person. And that really sets the stage for everything else that's said about formation, about technology, about educating, for the poor and for the marginalized. It's such a fitting document, such a fitting letter to come 60 years after Gravissimo.
That's great. So we're going to dig into 6 themes. We could have done many more. In fact, my first go round, Erin and I are working on a white paper. I think I've got like 13 sections.
Yeah.
It was, I just totally geeked out on this. And John, thank you for the suggestion to dig into this. So Erin, do you want to take theme 1 and run with that one?
Yeah. So Pope Leo really makes this again this beautiful case for education as formation, as opposed to just this functional training, right? The functionality of education, and as Catholic schools really focusing on that formation of the whole person. So let's kind of dig into that theme, that formation versus that functional training, and your thoughts on that.
Angela.
Yeah, sure. Well, I have to tell you that I was in Rome when this letter came out, and I was very excited because I had in my heart to go to Rome for two things this year. One was to visit Rome in the Jubilee year for education, because my own faith journey, I think, really sparked at the last Jubilee in 2000. I was at World Youth Day and I was a student, and I was gifted a trip to World Youth Day. And I think it was one of those moments where I encountered the life of the faith, the life of the church. And it was at a time when in Ireland, it wasn't always easy to find young people in the church and to feel that the church was relevant. But I remember going to Rome and seeing the liveliness of it, just the universality of it. So I really wanted to go back for the Jubilee. The other promise I had made myself was that if John Henry Newman ever became a doctor of the church, I would definitely go to Rome to see that happen, because equally so, John Henry Newman and Ireland have a beautiful relationship, a long-lasting one. And when I was a student, the other part, I suppose, was that my favourite place to visit, my favourite church still today, is Newman's University Church here in Dublin. And it's just around the corner from me here on St. Stephen's Green. And John Henry had always been a friend of mine, I would say, from childhood, from his poetry into his prayers, and then later as an educator. So I couldn't believe how beautifully fitting it was for Pope Leo to make him, a doctor of the church, a co-patron of Catholic education, and then to release such a beautiful letter that just captured to me what Newman has taught us all along, which is that, the formation of a person is really centered on the development of the whole person, and the importance of relationships in that development. So I think that's what Pope Leo is really saying to us, is that we always have to remember that formation is person-centered, education is person-centered. Who we believe the person to be in front of us is very important. And we are not, he uses the term a skills profile. We're not developing a skills profile. We are thinking that every student in our school, every person in our school has a face, a story, a vocation, that they're called to something. And again, that's a very Newman idea, that we are all committed to a task, to a vocation, and we might know it in this life, but we'll know it in the next. So that was what really struck me, is just that focus on the person of the teacher, the person of the student, the person in the community. I suppose Parker Palmer's idea that we teach who we are, that who we are is really important, and that we form a whole person. So that's what really struck me. It was just that sense of the beauty and the dignity of the person, and our understanding of the person. John. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of pull something in there. In the letter, Leo talks about this need to not compartmentalize the person, right? As part of that is seeing the human person as being integrated, that we don't lose. When we say we're not educating a skills profile, he's saying that that's not sort of the only thing, but that's an integral part of it. We do want to form the skills and the competencies and the mindsets of the young people that are entrusted to our care. But we know that when we do that, we are touching these humanistic processes. These, it's the Pierre Teilhard de Chardin sort of saying about how, we are not human beings having a spiritual experience. We are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so these human experiences and these spiritual components of ourselves are deeply integrated. And I love the Newman connection, so appropriate here, obviously, because of his declaration as a doctor of the church. And there's a line in the letter that talks about, schools being, and I'm going to see if I can find it here, a beacon in the night to guide navigation. And it reminds me of that John Henry Newman hymn of, lead kindly light. And so I love that imagery and that symbolism of education as light that carries the human person forward in his or her formation.
John, carrying on that theme, at Eiley, we've talked a lot about David Brooks' distinction between resume virtues and eulogy virtues. That seems relevant here. Could you expand on that? And I know you're going to be giving a little talk on that later this week, so I thought I'd tee you up.
So I think that distinction is so important, and understanding that the two are deeply intertwined, right? We don't actually form them kind of in isolation. We don't just form resume virtues on one day or one instructional block, and then we do sort of our eulogy virtues on the other side. They're deeply intertwined. And so when we're working on sort of our capacity to engage in higher order thinking skills, or engage our capacity to lead or to advocate or to, maybe engage in critical thinking or whatever, they're done in a way that also touches like our capacity to be compassionate, to be empathetic, right? And so that integrated notion of formation, I think, is super important. And I think one of the things that the Catholic school can do well at its fullest expression is that the Catholic school has to be uncompromising in the way that it forms those resume virtues, but always provides the context about how to order and orient the formation of those virtues towards things like compassion and empathy and the pursuit of justice and truth and beauty and goodness and all of those pieces. And so in my mind, I think that integrated formation, that sort of dual, sort of recursive pursuit of resume virtues as well as eulogy virtues is the heart of what we do in Catholic education.
Great, Erin. Any final thoughts on theme 1?
Oh, well, I just, again, and John, you talked about this in the introduction, just the timeliness of this. And this is, it's written for us in Catholic education for all the ages, right? I mean, it was relevant. It's that same consistent message and staying the course and just reiterating what we've built on. And one of the kind of the introductory comments of this is the genealogy of Catholic education, going back to the Desert Fathers. And again, this is a timeless message when we talk about this Christian anthropology, the formation of the person. And I just love that Pope Leo is so committed and adamant about this message, and again, never swaying from it. And that, again, for me as a practitioner, is just so affirming in the day-to-day work.
Great, thank you. Theme 2, this is one that really got me excited: the science of spiritual formation. The Pope's first new priority, so he's got 6 new priorities. The first is the inner life. Spaces for silence, discernment, dialogue with the conscience and with God. And remarkably, neuroscience backs us up. John, I've been studying at the recommendation of your fellow Holly Elkins, Dr. Lisa Miller's work from The Awakened Brain. Did you happen to pick that up when she recommended it?
No, I did not. You'd have to elaborate a little bit more.
I'm going to give you, Angela, by chance, have you read it, The Awakened Brain?
No, I have not.
Okay, I highly recommend it. It talks about the science of spirituality. So here, just a couple data points to share. 80% protection against depression when a mother and child value spirituality. It is the largest protective benefit in resilience literature. The number one way to prevent depression in young people is to have a spiritual life. Science proving what the Pope is talking about here. MRI studies show the cortical thickening in spiritual individuals in exact brain regions that weaken in depression. She found that if you pray, not 5 minutes a day, but if you pray 20 to 30 minutes a day over 10 years, it literally changes your brain. Again, this is science. She's not a Catholic. This is neuroscience. The practices that build moral character, altruism, love of neighbor, literally strengthen the brain. So, John, how should the science reframe how we think about the youth mental health crisis in our schools? We've been treating it mostly as medical therapeutic.
Right.
But I would argue the Pope and now neuroscience suggests something deeper, that we might be facing a spiritual crisis.
Yeah.
What do you think?
And I think the specific findings that you cited from that, this idea of how 20 to 30 minutes of prayer over a 10-year period of time rewires the brain and creates sort of that psychological resilience, like that's a very distinct element of spirituality, right? It's this focus on the interior life, this focus on contemplation. And I feel like this is something that we've explored at ILE as well, but I think that we're seeing kind of more and more as sort of like the pervasiveness of social media and technology, I think, continues to take hold and take root in our society, is that you can very much tell when a person lives an almost exclusively exterior life and does not have that space for interiority, for contemplation, for silence. And so, like, I think, when we look at the Apostolic Letter, when it talks about in 10.3, right, like the inner life being the priority, and the inner life not only being a space of refuge, a space of encounter, but being a space of depth, there is depth in withdrawing from sort of the exteriority of everyday life that builds resilience, that builds character, that builds the capacity to deal with the challenges and the complexities of the world that we live in. And I think it connects to some of the secular science around sort of the rewiring of the adolescent brain. Like Jonathan Haidt talks about it a ton in The Anxious Generation, about the rewiring of childhood, and he talks about how, you know, just the constant connectedness is drastically impacting the mental health of individuals. And I think what you're offering here is a solution, is a way to move forward by focusing on that interior life, that space of contemplation. And I think that Catholic schools, by practice, by prayer, by sacraments, by modeling cultures that are built on, you know, creating spaces of introspection, I think they offer something that's radically transformative.
That's good. And Angela, you are in schools. You were a principal. How do we create these spaces for silence, for discernment, and dialogue with conscience when we know students are constantly connected, as John was alluding to? They're constantly distracted. How do school leaders that are listening, how do they create these spaces for silence?
Well, I think what Pope Leo was saying to us is that we walk this road together. You know, I would say the first thing as a school leader or as a teacher is to create the silence in your own life, which is also difficult. You know, I think it's one of the greatest gifts we can give our school leaders and our teachers, a space to think about their students, space to think about their community, away from their community, you know, just sometimes just having time to reflect. And I think that's the interior practice of the person, of each person. Where can we find our own silence? Can we sit in silence? I always get worried about myself if I don't want to be in silence, you know. And I think that's the piece for all of us. We busy ourselves, and we have so many distractions in today's world, and our schools are busy places. So I think as I've developed my own philosophy of education over years, I would say I've come to a space where I think about doing less and doing it better, and creating space in the day where we have time for play, we have time for talking, we have time for reflection, we have time for meditation, and teaching children that, and realizing that for all of us it's a process. So we might start with 1 minute, we might start with 2, we might build up to 5, but can we sit with ourselves? So that's something we have to do for ourselves. And I think you know, it's one of the things that the school leaders struggle with a lot. One of the things I joke with our school leaders when I'm in our formation programs is that, you know, if you are sitting at your desk thinking about your school community and somebody comes in, are you tempted to grab a pen and pretend you're doing something else? And nearly all of them will say yes, because sitting thinking doesn't seem like busy work. And yet thinking about your school community, thinking about your people, thinking about what is the next thing to do is probably the most important thing that you can be doing as a leader. It's what I want in a leader. I want somebody who's thinking about us, you know. So it's that. I think, first of all, we have to model it for people, that we as leaders, as teachers, are calm and peaceful and have time within our day for prayer. I've spent a lot of time with the Benedictine sisters and monks in the west of Ireland, in Kylemore Abbey and in Glenstall. And one of the things I've learned from both of them is just the habit of prayer, and the habit and order of prayer, like how you build that into your day. In an authentic way, not in a performative way, but in a way that actually allows people to connect with God and connect with themselves. I remember meeting a monk years ago, and I quote him many times in Rome, and he looked very peaceful, and he was in a very peaceful, beautiful monastery. And all of us, we were a group of very busy principals and school leaders, and we were like, but how do we bring this peace back to our busy world? Like, you should see the places we work. Like, you just couldn't be so peaceful if you worked where we worked. And we asked him, tell us, give us something that will help us. And he said to us, do you have a window in your office? And we all had a window in our office, thank God. And he said, well, do you take time in the day to look out the window? And we said, oh, sometimes, you know. And he just encouraged us to just into our day build in times where we stop, where we reflect, where we pray. and just notice nature, notice the seasons as a start, and have spaces that we pray. So that's something I do a lot now with the principals I work with and with the school leaders. I help them to identify times in the day they can pray, places in their life that they can pray, holy places, places that they can go to, and then places that they can restore. Where can they go on pilgrimage, in the short and in the long term? We all need the bigger pilgrimages, but sometimes we just need small bursts of peace in the day and in the week and in the month. So that's something I think that we have to do first for ourselves, and then to think about our school community and say, well, how do we model it, and then how do we provide for it, and give value to it. Really, if we give value to it, I think that's also the important thing.
Yeah, I want to add on there. I mean, that whole idea of giving value to spaces of silent contemplation or prayer.
Yeah.
I think one of the important sort of mindset shifts is understanding that peace, and that that you shared from that anecdote there, is actually a sign of incredible strength and discipline and resilience, right? You talked about the practice of start with 1 minute of silence, then 2, then 5, then 10, and do it in a way where you're truly sort of sitting in that silence. That takes incredible discipline. And as somebody who has tried and failed multiple times to incorporate sort of spaces of silence, and I'm not currently like a school leader, even right now I'm finding it difficult. How much more difficult is it for a school leader to find that? But I think if we frame it as a way to build strength and resilience, that there's great discipline in that, the same kind of discipline that allows for a leader to be transformational, to move a community forward, to act courageously in the face of challenges or whatever. That same sort of wellspring of strength is also the same wellspring of strength that can be cultivated, the same discipline that can be and crystallized through silence and contemplation, rather than just saying, oh, that person has peace. How nice that person is so peaceful. They don't really know what's going on. There's actually deep strength and deep discipline in there that all leaders can benefit from, that impacts their practice of leadership holistically.
There's a great story from Father Thomas Keating, who is sort of the godfather of centering prayer in America. And he was giving a retreat on centering prayer and the silence that you both are talking about. And a nun was sent off to do 20 minutes of silent prayer. And she came back after 20 minutes and she said, "Oh, Father, I am a failure at this. I utterly failed during my 20 minutes. And he said, "Well, why?" She said, "Oh, I had hundreds of thoughts that came to me." And he said, "Oh, that's beautiful. That's hundreds of times to come back to God." It is, to your point, John, it is so difficult, but it is so important. Another quick story, Cardinal Bernardine here in Chicago, when he was Bishop Bernardine, was walking across the seminary one day, and a young seminarian came bounding up to him and said, "Bishop, how's your prayer life?" And it froze him. And he realized he didn't have a prayer life. He said his prayers, and he went to church. And that day forward, he committed to 15 minutes of silent prayer every morning. And when he became Cardinal Bernardine, it went to 20 minutes. And according to my pastor, upon his passing, he was doing 30 minutes of silent prayer every morning. And he told Father Watts, my pastor, that it changed everything. Erin, you want to wrap up theme 2?
Yeah, no, I love, Angela, I love what you said about modeling it. And I think in you're in leadership formation. We all work with school leaders in our various roles. And not only do we need to model it and be people of contemplation and stillness, but what you also said, placing value in it. And so, and I have found giving permission.
Yes.
You need to give people permission, because we live in a world that values busyness, right?
Yes.
The busier you are, the more successful you are, the more efficient you are. All of those things are these badges of honor. And so to take a step back and to not only place value, but just that very practical step of giving permission
Yes.
to do it. I think that has gone a long way with my leaders, and it changes everything. Absolutely. That deep thinking, that stillness. It has certainly changed the way that I lead, and has, I think, made me a more impactful leader in this work that I've been called to. So just to have Pope Leo again just reaffirm all of that, how powerful for us as Catholic educational leaders.
Absolutely. And he's talking about discernment and the importance of discernment
Yes.
today. And you can't discern if you don't have time, if you don't know how to, you know. So
Yes.
I think it's a great reminder for all of us not to be busy fools, you know, to
Right.
to take that time and to be intentional about how we give our time and where we give our time. It's a great gift. There's lots there for formation. He says a lot.
Great. Let's move to theme 3, serving the poor as identity, not charity. Here's where I think the letter gets prophetic. Quoting him, the Pope, "For the Christian faith, the education of the poor is not a favor, but a duty. Where access to education remains a privilege, the church must push to open doors and invent new paths, because losing the poor is equivalent to losing the school itself." I mean, amazing. So the Pope calls education of the poor not a favor, but a duty. This identity language, not charity language. How does this moral framing differ from typical American policy discourse about educational access? I'll go to John because I threw in you could probably answer it from an Irish perspective after that, but it's a different way of looking at it. So John, what are your thoughts on that?
I think one of the questions that we grapple with in Catholic schools here in the United States is who are Catholic schools for, right? And so there's the old saying from Cardinal James Hickey, who is in Washington. He was asked, he made the comment about how we don't serve students and families in Catholic schools because they're Catholic. We serve them because we are Catholic, right? And so I love this affirmation, I'd had this highlighted, underlined multiple times about how losing the poor is equivalent to losing the school itself. And I think in 2025, what we're challenged to do, in addition to reckoning with the question of who is the Catholic school for, is who are the poor, right? And I think, we have in this image, people that are economically disadvantaged, people that are, second language learners, different pieces like that, people, who are facing trauma or whatever. So I think our definition of who the poor is needs to be expanded, because I think poverty looks and feels and sounds a lot of different ways in our modern society, right? So it's not just economic poverty, right? It could be spiritual poverty, right? It could be, a poverty of psychological well-being because of trauma, because of adverse childhood experiences. And so, I think one of the challenges sort of embedded in this call, to make sure that we can continue to serve the poor as identity and not charity, is that we need to push back against a vision of Catholic education that is kind of like simply a refuge or a space that is set apart from society, something that's idyllic, something where, if families are coming from messy situations, we kind of want to not have them part of this community because we're trying to create a community of Christ-like believers or Christ-like people, right? But what we need to do is understand that Catholic education is best expressed in a world and in a context that is sometimes as messy and sometimes as unresolved as the world that we live in. I wrote here in another piece that we can't have Catholic schools that withdraw from the messiness of deep divisions within our society, right? Because what that does is it trivializes, ignores, or discards the part of a child or a family circumstance that makes us uncomfortable. Leo writes in this letter that encounter with the things with the aspects of kids and families' lives that might be messy or unresolved are encounters that deeply transform us. Encountering that messiness, encountering sort of the unresolved parts of people's lives are part of how we are formed and transformed, holistically. And so, yes, we need to serve the poor and understand that who we consider as poor needs to be expanded, but understand that that's integral to our salvation. It's part of our journey towards heaven, just as much it is for the kids and families that we serve in Catholic schools.
That's really a good point around the poor. I remember talking to a Jesuit when I was at Cristo Rey and trying to get him to lead one of the Cristo Rey schools. He was at a traditional Jesuit school, and I was saying, come and serve the poor. And he said, I am serving the poor, Rob. And to your point, John, it was the poor in spirit. He said, these families that I serve are broken, and they're as impoverished as the students you serve, a different type of poverty. But that's really good. Angela, turning to you, the Pope mentions some women pioneers. Mother Cabrini, who Erin and I love the movie and highly recommend it. St. Catherine Drexel, I'm very fond of, and look at the Drexel Fund. Obviously, Elizabeth Seton. They didn't wait for permission or perfect conditions. I mean, Mother Cabrini, man, get out of her way. Another one he didn't mention, but Dorothy Day. These women, they started schools and tenements on the frontiers, serving populations no one else would. What would that kind of innovation look like today, and what risks should leaders be willing to take?
Well, so this is a topic that's beloved to my heart because I was a Loretto school principal and teacher. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Loretto order, but it was founded by an English woman, Mary Ward. Also, the Congregation of Jesus, I suppose, they're also known as that, and they've recently come together. But she was a visionary herself in that she wanted education for girls. She wanted to start an order that would be women teaching out in the world that would, I suppose, be like a society of Jesus, but for women. She was ahead of her time. I think she was frequently referred to, she and her teacher friends were referred to as galloping girls. But she had this sense that women in time would come to do much and that they were called to be seekers of truth and doers of justice. And that's something that is still, I think, something that inspires Loretto schools worldwide and personally has inspired me through my own formation with the Loretto sisters that I worked alongside. And my first principal was a Loretto sister. And what she used to say to us always, Sister Patricia, was that, it's to do what is necessary, I suppose, first of all. And that's the piece that I think all of us are called to, is to know our people, know who we're called to work with, and not presume that we know what's best. I think that was one of the things I learned first as a young teacher in a very disadvantaged community at the time. And one of the children said to me, "You don't know what it's like to grow up in the flats." And she was right. I didn't. And I set about learning, and I think that's always what John Henry did, I think, in trying to set up the university here in Ireland, in setting up his school for boys later. But I think it's also something that those women did, was really see, well, who are the poor and who needs help today? And I think it's something that we have to think about as Catholic schools, because it's very easy to offer it to people who can pay for it. We don't have that situation in Ireland, but at the same time, we have a more diverse population now, and we have to think always about how are we answering the call of the people in front of us. So that's what I think they still say to us today. Education is an act of justice, I think Pope Francis said that to us as well, and Pope Leo refers to it, this idea that to teach is it's a mission of love, because first of all, you have to know your students, know your people, and then help to see how they can flourish. And we all flourish in different ways. Another Englishman I love, although I have to be careful now because he was actually born in Belfast, but he's an Oxford man, C.S. Lewis. C.S. Lewis would always say that, how I think it's monotonously boring are all the tyrants and how gloriously different were all the saints, and I think that's always something that inspires me as a teacher, as a leader, is thinking about, well, who's in front of us and how do we help them flourish in the way that they're called to flourish, in a very integrated way. And I think that's something that the Pope Leo is reminding us again and again, is that Christian education is holistic, and we just have to support and walk with. And those lovely synodal words, accompany, walk with, listen, dialogue. I think that's what we're called to do. And certainly in our world today, we're inclined to shut ourselves off from people who don't agree with us, who don't hold the same views. And I think Pope Leo is saying to us today, no, we walk with people, we encounter, we dialogue, we listen, we learn together, we don't presume to know.
Erin, you want to wrap up theme 3 before we take a break?
Yeah. Well, yeah. And again, just it is who we are. I mean, we go back to in today's gospel, the blind beggar and Jesus reaching out and what is it you want me to do? And I think that's we have these families coming to us, and we need to ask them that question. What is it that you want us to do? I mean, it's just it's the fabric on which we've been built. And so again, Leo in his wisdom really knocks that point out for us.
You beat me to it. I was going to use the gospel later on, but you stole my closing. I got to quickly come up with the closing. We're going to take a brief break here to hear a word from our sponsor.
Catholic Virtual is a proud sponsor of the Next Class 2.0 and dedicated to supporting Catholic school leaders. Our partner schools turn to us for online teaching solutions that fill teacher openings, expand their catalogs to offer more course choice, and provide options for students an alternative learning experience. Learn more about how we can support you at catholicvirtual.com.
Okay, the break is over. Okay, theme 4, and I didn't think we'd ever get to 6. What was I thinking? We're really going to get through it in under an hour, but let's jump to technology, AI, and the human person. This is obviously a really hot topic. Let me quote him here. No algorithm can substitute what makes education human. Poetry, irony, love, art, imagination, the joy of discovery, and even learning from mistakes. John, we'll go back to you. The Pope calls for digital discernment. I mean, just beautiful digital discernment. What does that mean in an era of AI tutors, adaptive learning platforms, predictive analytics?
Just the last few things you mentioned about AI tutors, predictive analytics, personalized instruction, those are things we've been talking about in education for a while.
Yeah.
Right? Like AI just happens to bring sort of a new approach, probably some more sophistication to some of those things, but like at least in sort of the broader K-12 education space, we've been trying to automate certain things. It was blended in personalized learning like 10, 15 years ago, right? It was computer assisted, instruction, even going back 40, 50 years, right? Like the historian Audrey Waters has written a ton about sort of like the integration of technology and sort of teaching machines, right? So like that whole prospect is nothing new. I like the phrase digital discernment because what it requires is attentiveness, right? It's attentiveness to where our learners are, to where we are, to the space of different technologies and tools in the space of education. And in the letter, he says that, hyper-digitalization can fragment attention. And so presence and attention is such an important I think asset in terms of discerning how digital tools, whether it be AI, right now it's generative AI, 10, 15 years ago it was blended and personalized learning, adaptive learning tools. Who knows what it's going to be sort of in 5 or 10 years, but we will always face this challenge of how do we best implement the tools and the resources that we have at the present day. But I think just those practices of attentiveness and discernment I think are really important. Also, one of the things that I had kind of seen on LinkedIn a couple of weeks ago, there's a gentleman by the name of John Reyes, no blood relation to me. He works for an organization called Digital Continent and has this thing called the Faith in AI Project. And he had shared sort of this reflection about, how, people within education sectors, within the church and sort of within broader society are struggling with how disruptive generative AI is to people's livelihoods, people's jobs. And one of the things that he says sort of in response to that is that the Christian response is one of accompaniment. How do we walk with people through the disruptions, positive or negative, right? So I'm not trying to attach any sort of like sentiment to the disruptions of AI, but understanding that disruptions sort of happen whenever technology is introduced. So what he says is that in the face of sort of what AI is posing to us, what we need to do is accompany people and walk people through, how the disruption sort of affects them and continue to walk with them on the journey of how are they constructing and making new meaning out of the work that they do, the lives that they live, the relationships that they have in the face of these new technologies. And so I think attentiveness, and I think obviously the digital discernment that Leo talks about is important, but also this kind of stance of accompaniment to the people and to the families whose kind of their realities and their worlds are changed and sort of disrupted by kind of these new technologies.
Let's shift a little practical. So Angela, for our school leaders that are listening, John referenced earlier Jonathan Haidt's research that shows cell phones hurt learning and social development. Should our schools ban them? Some are going phone free. What's your take on what the Pope's letter tells us about cell phones? Or you could take AI, like AI adoption. Do they ban that? So with this technology, what should schools be doing?
I think he gives us a good direction in telling us that technology should serve and enrich the learning process and not replace it. I think that's what he's reminding us is like, don't let it impoverish what we know to be important in education. We know that relationships matter. We know that it happens, to quote John Henry, who was quoting de Francis de Sales again, heart to heart, and to know its place, I suppose. And like I would always say to people, don't be afraid, and I think Pope Leo's saying that to us. He's saying to us, engage with it, use it where it's appropriate, but also know when it's not. And don't let it replace. And I think, look, we have an opportunity here. When I think about, what are we educating for? What are we forming for? We're hoping for holistic, rounded people. John Henry Newman, I'm back to him. I can't forget about him at the moment. I feel like he's sitting beside me. But this man was a theologian, a philosopher, a musician, a poet, a writer. He would not have been worried about AI. He was a well-rounded person whose education served him for life. And that was something that he was always thinking about for his students. I think it gives us a nice chance to rethink what is our schools for, what is our education for, and how do we use it, how do we embrace it, but also where do we know when it's not appropriate and it's not for us. That's part of the discernment, I think. And again, it'll come back to how do we think well about it. And for that, we need those spaces for silence. We need those spaces for discussion to say, well, who is the human person? What is education for? Those big questions that people love to talk about. School leaders love to talk about them. Principals love to talk about them. But often they get busy fixing the roof and doing the the practicalities of leadership and running a school. So I just think for all of us, probably one of the gifts this letter is a chance to reflect and to step back and say, well, let's have time for all of us to ask those bigger questions. That's I think that's the gift of it.
That's great.
I think to maybe tag on a little bit, I think on that kind of the more policy question that you're asking there, Rob, is what should the policy response be? I think whatever the policy response that schools and systems of schools decide to take up, I think it has to be co-constructed, right? I think probably one of the most harmful things you might do as a school leader is just say, hey, you know what? I read this, and this, and as a school leader, we are saying whatever, no cell phones, or we're banning the use of generative AI, whatever. Co-construction is so important, right? And I think co-constructing these policies are important for two reasons. I think the first one is asking those tough questions, right? So asking questions about sort of what do we believe is the purpose of education? What do we believe is the purpose of technology? Like, what do we envision as how we want, our young people to look, sound, and feel like when they're engaged in the formation of the person within the Catholic school? Education happens as a part of that, right? So when we ask those questions together, we learn together, right? So that's the first, I think, importance of co-constructing those policies. I think the second one is it affirms the role of the parent as the primary educator in a Catholic school, right? So if we just impose policies, we don't get that deep parent buy-in, and we are robbing parents of their role as the primary educators of their children. You mentioned, Jonathan Haidt's research and what he's talked about in the Extra Generation, and one of his recommendations is that whatever kind of policy or practice fixes we might put in place, they're only as good as the collective agreement of a community to buy into it and then share in sort of the enforcement or the rollout of those policies. If 99 parents are on board and one parent isn't, it's not going to work long term, right? So co-constructing, I think, whatever the policy or practice response is critical.
Erin, final thoughts on
Yeah, and I do. Yeah, just extending, John, what you said. I agree, and I think it just for us as leaders, then it really points to that culture of discernment that we've already talked about creating the trust, right, within your communities, and it just, it goes back to that formation piece, and being really, really clear about who we are and what we do, and that's mission. And so those other things then can come in and kind of shore that up. But when we're clear on those things and have created that culture of trust and discernment, and we're all on board with that mission, then then we can navigate these things. And I love, Pope Leo says, technological progress is part of God's plan for creation.
Yeah.
This is part of the work that we do. It's not ancillary to the work that we do. It is part and parcel of this work. And so we do it together. So again, a lot there. Rob, we could have spent like one podcast on each of these themes. there's so much here. It's really beautiful. But from that leadership perspective, just so much richness and again, just reaffirming so much that we're already doing.
That's great. Thank you for that. John, Angela, we've covered a lot, but let's get real. Catholic education faces declining enrollment, aging religious orders, resource constraints. Some leaders listening are exhausted. The Pope calls us choreographers of hope who draw new maps. When you think about your work with Catholic educators, what gives them hope? What sustains them in this very difficult, challenging time? And how do they become and ensure that they are choreographers of hope drawing new maps? Who wants to go?
Oh, look, I think it's probably the joy. Well, it's the joy of my work is like time with leaders, and I often show them a picture of John Henry Newman. There's one particular one where he's just got his head in his hands and he looks exhausted, and I always used to say, long before he was a doctor of the church, and even before he was a saint, really, I used to say, like, this man is for school principals, because so many of the things he did just didn't work out and they were difficult, and he came across difficulties and people who misunderstood him and questioned his motives and all of these things. But because of his interior life, because of his prayer, because of his deep understanding of his own mission, and also understanding he was part of a bigger one, that it wasn't all on him, he had a freedom to move and to let go of things and to begin again. And I think that's something that all of us can relax in this document, is that Pope Leo is reminding us that we are little stars shining brightly, doing our best, but we're part of this bigger constellation, and we're not alone in it. And actually, he's reminding us again and again that we are part of a global church. We're not even just part of a local Catholic community. We're local and we're global, which is one of the greatest gifts in Catholic education. And I think it's something that I've seen a lot. I've had a really privileged life in that I've got to work and study all over the world at different times, in India and Kenya and Australia and in America, and even being part of the European Union, we've got all of these partnerships with European schools. And you can't but take hope in the fact that there are people who get up all over the world every day and they go into classrooms and they do everything that teachers do and everything that school leaders do to create these beautiful, joyful atmospheres for people to learn in and flourish in. And I think that's the thing that I really take from the document is, we are doing very meaningful work, there's meaning in it. There's not a day that we can waste. There's no love wasted, it's a work of love. It's a work of hope. Pope Francis used to say that education was a work of hope. So I think whenever we lack hope, one of the things we always have to come back to is what you were saying, I suppose, Erin, is our mission and our vision of our school, what we're about. And when we reconnect with that and we're clear on the mission, the vision, the values of our school, and then we remember that we have these people, beautiful little people entrusted to us by their parents who love them so much. Like, what a privilege, and what a privilege to see them set out on their life journey and know that somehow you gave them gifts that would help them along the way. So that's what gives me hope. And I think it's what he's reminding us again and again, that we have people, that we are part of a bigger plan, and that we can relax in that and know that we do our part and we do it well. And if we do that, good things happen, and the Lord has it. It's in his control. He knows what he's about, to quote John Henry again. Do you want to do a podcast on John Henry?
Let me close it out with a short story. Last week I got a call from a former student of mine. 25 years ago, I was his English teacher. And he said to me, Marquette High saved my life. That was his quote. Marquette High saved my life. And that's what you're saying, Angela. That's what happens when Catholic education is true to its mission. We form whole persons, serve the poor, build community, connect students to God. It transforms lives. So
Teach
thank you
people to be happy. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I think God would like us to enjoy this life. So,
Yeah.
Angela, John, thank you too for joining us in the next class. John, thank you for the idea. Brilliant idea. And as Erin said, we could have done 4 podcasts just on this. So
Yeah.
I can't wait. I can't wait for the next 3. The next 3 are going to be incredible. I know we're just setting the stage. There's more to come.
Well, John, Angela, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks. I really enjoyed it.
Wow, that was something, Erin.
Oh my gosh, it was I had chills like so many different times throughout and tears in my eyes. I'm just I'm so touched by this letter and just the conversation. Really beautiful.
It was. For those that have not read it, I highly recommend it. I found it incredibly accessible, Erin.
Yeah. Yep.
It wasn't some Roman Latin something or
Right.
another. It was incredibly accessible. I thought incredibly well written. For our listeners, Erin and I are working on a white paper that will be published sometime in the new year, where we dig into this in much more depth because there is so much here. Erin, any final thoughts? Carry us home.
Well, I think that we, again, as practitioners, we have a great map to navigate the future of Catholic education, and what a powerful time to be leaders in this great mission.
Great. Finally, thank you to our producer Carlos, and to all of our listeners. If you like this, please give us a 5-star rating, a thumbs up, but most importantly, share this with your friends, family, and colleagues. Thank you all, and we'll see you in the next class.
Thank you for tuning in.